I'm really happy to see so many of you tonight with us at the second Sliver lecture this semester. This year we are focusing on the theme of applied imaginaries. The lecture tonight is a very special one because our guest tonight, Chermayeff, is a member of our institute. We are really happy and excited to work with Sam, and I can only second Maya's introduction from last month before Carla's lecture that this Friday's session promises to be an exciting start to the weekend. Of course, we, especially in the Studio One, we know Sam by now and every member of the Institute as well, but I will introduce Sam formally for those of you who don't. Sam Chermayeff is an architect, designer, teacher undertaking projects worldwide. Trained in architecture at the University of Texas in Austin and the Architectural Association in London. Sam is a founding partner and director in the architecture firm June 14, Meyer-Grohbrügge and Chermayeff, and Sam Chermayeff office in Berlin. With offices in New York and Berlin, the studios work on a wide range of design-driven projects ranging from larger multi-unit residential buildings in Berlin, several small houses in New York, and furniture all over. Sam began his architectural career at SANAA with Kazuyo, Sejima, and Ryue Nishizawa, where he worked for more than 5 years on an array of projects across build and curatorial work, including 2009 Serpentine Pavilion, and 2010 Venice Architecture Biennale. He has taught at Columbia GSAAP, MSA Münster, the Royal College of Art, DIA Dessau, Cornell University, and Architectural Association. In October 2024, Sam joined the IOA. In his studio, working with the students, he likes to celebrate the extraordinary within the ordinary. Sam is generously inviting us to his world of towers, rooms, kitchens, bathrooms, and beasts. A realm where we can explore how to live alone and with the others. Sam challenges us with design tasks that delicately balance on what he describes as a thin line between something and nothing, inspiring our critical reflection of what we do as architects. Please give a warm welcome to Sam Chermayeff.
Guys, it's really, really nice to have a job here. To be very clear, I really love you as colleagues and as, well, all of you as colleagues actually. I think of it as it's all kind of a mess here in the nicest possible way, in the sense that I feel that we're all kind of working it out together, trying to figure out what this new place is. I'm going to step out of that. Yeah. And also thanks for having me to talk to you. And Mr. Jack, thanks for spending all day here with our students, and thanks everybody for the polls. And if one of them is blocking your view, like put that little piece of paper so that it doesn't, bother that poor person. So getting this very, very, kind of quite fancy professorship that I'm very happy to have came in a really good time. So the last year was just a really good year, work-wise, right? Architecture-wise. It was a good year in all senses. My kids are cute. I'm very happy, man. But I'm also in a time where what I used to do, so what I of course will show some of what I showed in the short lecture to get this position. But actually a lot of other work happened and changed in a very short time, more or less since I've been here with you. And that's been exciting. And so I'll just sum it up with I got very good at arranging things. So I'm very good at, if you putting kind of furniture freely in a beautiful way. And I think a lot of people are good at that. I'm not trying to win prizes about it. I'm just saying And so arranging different programs is one idea that I have. And suddenly, as I'm like turning into a pretend grown-up, or like more convincing to myself, or like, yeah, I'm not, I'm trying to organize, I gave up drinking, these kind of things. I also had this strange desire for clarity that, and less funny. And so I'm toggling back and forth, and I think certainly my students who deal with me understand that I'm toggling back and forth between those two questions, like how funny, how put together, bananas on the crane, for example, or like can we like hit the rabbit like right, can we catch the rabbit right there? And so you'll see that I still now in the current work 50-50. And it's not that I'm complaining. So sometimes to me it's very clear, right? It's like, it's like somebody said I need rocks, somebody wanted a rock project, somebody bought a big fancy drill, we put candles in them. It works great. It works fine as a little shelf. Even that coffee cup doesn't fall over. I still use it at home. And then there are other moments like this thing, and I start with something from a long time ago in my world. So 10 years ago I made this triangle bed. And it's something that follows me around, and it was partly my fault, but also it's just it's kind of a good thing, and it defines what I do in a lot of senses, which is to say that my kids can understand it. Like they understand that it's a bed, and they understand that it's also something strange. So they know what they're looking at, well, at the same time, and you do too, and then at the same time you can kind of connect with it. So, but then a kind of accident happens, which I didn't intend, right? It's the polemic of the bed. Sorry. Hopefully she doesn't go back. That's the one emergency phone that always rings, because I didn't pick it up ever. Anyway, what I wanted to draw your attention to here is like when an accident happened, which is if you put a triangle in a rectangular room, and most rooms are rectangular, as we all know, you end up with much, much better spaces in the rest of the room. And I didn't know, but that's what makes it. What makes it is the rest of the room is a place, in a way that if you put a rectangular bed, even much smaller inside this room, it's not a place anymore, right? It's all bed. And then the space of the bed itself, right? So, of course, it's 10 years ago, so like it was more pornographic than now. So now it's more, my life is more dinosaurs on the corner than it is orgies, which is totally fine with me. But the space relation is the same, right? And that became quite interesting for me. And I think that the fragility of that spatial organization matters a lot. And that's something maybe we haven't gotten that into in the studio because we would do big things and tiny things. But at some point, I like to get into it. So together with Architecture G, we just made this showroom. Not just, I think it was last year. But we made a showroom where, like the bed, the center was a triangle. And what we did together was we made a really shitty model of that triangle, first things first. And then we were like, now we're done. So we made a paper model. And then we were like, how do we build it just like that paper model? And that's what it is. It's 6mm steel together with the occasional stick, and it really, really bends. Like, it bends a lot. Like, if you touch it with a finger, it moves, right? And it's just welded together, and it really is just those sticks, and there's nothing kind of else to it, and they all lean there as if it's the model. We stuck a table through a wall, and it holds it up. And then you paint it, and it's perfect for light, and it's, I guess I should have a film, but if you jam on it, it moves, 10 centimeters from the center of it. Yet it won't ever kind of fall over. And so I think I'm interested in, let's say, like the clarity thing of that floor plan is pretty straightforward, actually. Right, then you get 3 or 4 spaces around. You block the entrance up there. You have working places down here, kitchen down here. Simple enough, but then it becomes also about this kind of fragile arrangement thing. So, back to like whether this is like solidly in the sensical part or not is to be discussed. But it works, obviously, of course. Because going backwards again in time for a while, like what I do a lot, as I've mentioned to many of you, is I make a ton of kitchens. Partly because it's a pain in the ass and I noticed that nobody else did it. I should start with that. It's a difficult thing to do in an original way. So I didn't understand why, and I had a lot of time, as many of you do have time. I came from this set of time, and I didn't even cook. You can see that I had a very expensive, fancy light that's very hard to move on top of the stove, so I never used it. And I was, whatever it was, I think under 30. So it's been a minute. But I was like, okay, why are kitchens the way they are? I just put that together, and then I asked myself, why are kitchens the way they are? How can this be? And I realized that kitchens are the way they are because of a strange German thing. So that, and instead I wanted to kind of celebrate each object and each function, and then sort of think about it like I imagined Rem Koolhaas would if he hadn't been making big buildings, but had been kind of thinking like, well, let's make this program down to here, like this one thing becomes the point, and this other thing then becomes another point and another point, right? So the idea that you're there in a kind of dance with your toaster became very important to me. And that became part of our work, like that this toaster is this object, and suddenly you think about whether you're fat or skinny or feeling tired or not when you use this toaster. And it wobbles a little, but it never falls off, and it works fine. It's also an excellent toaster. English works perfectly. But then I started to get kind of more refined about it and more about, like I realized that once you start separating it out, once you make kitchens like no longer architecture and furniture, then you end up with like a possibility for shared space and communality. So I started to think about like how you can start to pull these functions away from a wall into a place. And so I made a coffee table that makes coffee, which weirdly, there are no other coffee tables that make coffee, except the various versions that I make. So it was a particularly good idea, I think. It's the only one of two things that I make that people occasionally buy. By occasion, I mean a couple times a year, but somebody texts me like, hey, can I buy that thing? And I'm like, yeah, So what it's about is deconstruction, right? Or what it became about was deconstruction, because the Neufried and the Nazis and so on decided that 90 centimeters was working well because you could put whatever machine, because they're German, they want to organize things, they want to put a machine in, and they want to put a machine on top, and they want them all to fit together, just like RAL colors are kind of ugly because they're organized to be all the same, and it lacks this kind of, it's very practical, but it's also a kind of thing that we agreed on ideologically as an industrial quality with so many generations back that I realized like, oh, we don't have to do that. We don't have to do it. So what I've been doing for all this time is kind of deconstructing, and this is just one that's under construction now that's quite kind of advanced, and those are just the boxes. You can even see that the dishwasher that's meant to go in there isn't in the drawing. And I happen to like this rhino drawing from the people in my office because for whatever reason each thing is on its own layer, and so as a result you see in the drawing that they're totally independent, unlike normal kitchens that you draw, you would keep them on one layer, right? And that the multiple layers allows for the multiple connections. It doesn't matter exactly what all that is. And then again I'm like debating all the time between putting it together and taking it apart, right? So at the same time it's like, okay, but stoves are fit very well in general into the 60 by 60 or 90 by 60 by 90 block. And so then I started to be like, okay, well, how can we dismantle the stove? And then suddenly you make a round stove and it's clear that nothing quite fits in there. And then suddenly you're also cooking together. And that became really important to me. Like that this object as a public, let's say a public space. Just like that photo. And back to triangles, it also really, like so many apartments in Berlin, you have the water on a transversal wall, and then invariably are facing that wall. And so so there are actually like quite a lot of triangle kitchens, and that really works really well because, right, even if you're home alone, you're looking out a window. If you're using that kitchen, no matter what you're facing, you're turned to the window. And if somebody else is there, you're facing them. So as a result of that really simple move, and it's totally practical. You might ask what happens in the dead space in the back. One of them opens and you can fit like your water cases back there behind the shelf for days on end. So you can stack, you know. Because I live in Germany, I'm confused that I have to sell every single thing as purely practical. I'm happy to do it, actually. I'm not really complaining. It's just like a weird part of being an architect in Germany in 2025 is that you have to pretend that this isn't 100% practical item, which it also is. Right? It's got a drain, it's got biotrash, it's got 2 inductions, you can even grow plants in the middle. It's got everything. So we do this right? These are all built versions. You know, there's something like related to today, like a pole that have wine glasses, and more poles that have pots that went around, right? We also do bathrooms. I won't go into it, but like, you know, just this is in Brenda Huber's house where I lived for a long time, and that was in the same spot as that kitchen used to be, where the plumbing's too high, and so suddenly I had this problem, and there's the answer. And then it's very practical. It's the best step I ever made by far. It was a gravestone uncut, and it feels nice underneath. I go on and on with this cooking and being together and like dividing things out and bringing them together. Because that's in fact what I'm dealing with, and I'm very unsure about it. It's not, I mean, I haven't been an architect long enough to know that you can't really be unsure about it. You have to pretend to be sure most of the time. But for this moment, I'm going to pretend that, not pretend, I'm going to admit that I'm really deeply unsure, because it gets worse when it gets bigger. This is a giant refrigerator, very big. This is for Brenda Huber in his Fry Auto house, where it starts to get unclear again, right? Where the bean shape around this Fry Auto in the Oko house becomes, you know, a bit free, and then he can put whatever he wants, because he's very particular about whatever he wanted, and he insisted on that mealy oven. I don't know why. I mean, he's a good cook, so fair enough. And then, you know, going backwards a little bit, again, you know, so we're a little bit out of order, and when I get to the buildings, it stays out of order. But I thought about it, so it's not just that I can't do it. You know, for a long time, I was really interested in jamming functions together, right? So, you know, table, you have a street light. It's handy to deal with the space problem that this room is full of, right? So you can, you know, meanwhile, you have to put a hell of a lot of steel in that table to make that not tip over. It turns out, I came to later, it makes a very nice space. So even with that bright light, you somehow gather under it. It somehow makes something. And likewise, this is like a shoe closet that has a chair that you can sit down and you can turn around and you can see your feet, and it's a mirror so you can see your shoes. And, you know, so practical concerns, which I think that all of my students can relate to, like, when in doubt, deal with a practical concern and you'll be okay. And likewise, like a wardrobe with a desk, so you put your keys, your sunglasses down, etc. Right? And here's just a table with a desk. I don't even know if this one's still good, but I sort of like the complicationness of alone versus together, like whether you invite someone or not, which gets into some kind of poetry. I favor together. I mean, what was the name of that chair that I claim to have never built today, which is that?
Kozus.
Kozus. I'm going to start saying that. Kozus, thank you. I made some version. And I guess I started getting interested in furniture that made space, and this is this kind of additive series. But I'm also trying to study what, like, basic things, right? So I did an exhibition last year called Tent Typologies, which is entirely of my own making, trying to think of different ways to make tents, like what are the natural ways to make tents. And then sure enough, the ones that are not following the rules of exactly how you do that and follow the forces don't work at all. So the New York City awning works, the dome tent works, the regular awning works in steel, the A-frame works fine, obviously Buckminster Fuller works, the market tent works. In the back you can imagine a circus tent in there and a kind of Bedouin tent. But then if you try to do that tent, it looks like crap. You know, if I couldn't get it to work, you know, no matter what I did. Same with like the funky ones. But the ones that follow the rules work perfectly. So I'm interested in that you can read it. Again, back to like the triangle thing I said about the triangle bed, that it's really important to me that my kids get it. And they do. My kids really like what I do. Even my kids are 3 and 6, and so like that's the kind of test. Like, do you get this, or is it silly? But then back to like really clear things. So I got friends with the director of Knoll, this American furniture company. You could argue about whether it's American instead, but it's American. And I pitched this idea that she had, because I really liked this piece of furniture, this credenza that she made in various sizes. But in her time in America in the 50s, the office was the center of design, right? I mean, SOM and so forth, and you can imagine, if you haven't actually seen all the really beautiful interiors, Gordon Bunshaft and his office and having a Knoll credenza, but that's not what we're doing anymore. Like now even like the most Gordon Bunshafty world is a domestic situation. So everything I do is, I naturally see everything and think like, how's that gonna work in a house, right? And I kind of think that everything does work in a house. Like I don't think that there are any rules about that. But in fact, all Florence Knoll's things aren't deep enough for codes, for example. So they're not 60 deep, they're 48 deep, which is odd, right? And so I pitched to Knoll that basically their thing is like USM and Vitso and so forth. Like she already made the system. And so now we come out this year with all of Florence Knoll's, like I didn't change a single detail, really? Like really? I just changed the form to be domestic. So it's Florence Knoll exactly as you would like it to be, but it's a bar cabinet, bookshelves that never made a book has, you know? It's like, I don't even need to, you really don't need a drawing more complicated than that. You could just iPhone it and be like, yeah, tell the guy who made that other base to make that, and that's how it is. I did, you know, the bed works perfectly, right? You screw it to the back. The wood bookshelf, right? I did say push to open, and I did change the black thing to the chrome polished thing, and I said that chrome turns out to be bad for the world. Maybe you know that. I wasn't clear about that, but anyway, it's polished stainless, costs the same, fine. And so, and then I let them, you tell me what color you want it. And they started doing material finishes and so forth, and now it became whatever it became, but the detail's exactly the same. And I'm in this kind of concept of like kill the rabbit. I think that this is like, yeah, let's do that. And then another thing that I do for Knoll, which is really nice, probably most of you should know this table by Sarman. It's a really nice table. It's their best-selling table. Like, they make a lot of money selling that table. So they sell that table, and they don't do anything with the offcuts. And I asked if I could start making plates. So I'm making plates. I use the offcuts and we're making plates. And it doesn't matter how efficient it is because they were doing nothing with it. Their idea of recycling, he said to me, like, we recycle like putting it back in the ground. I was like, no, that was solid rock before and now. And so, and then of course, which is wild, because I worked at SANAA, I should mention that for a second. I worked at SANAA for a long time. So it happens a lot that I accidentally make it too thin, right? Sejima knows what she's doing when she makes it thin. She's like very clear on why things are thin or thick. And when you work there for a long time, you just naturally get obsessed with trying to get a mullion smaller and trying to get a plate thinner. And so the people who cut that table can get that plate to be like this. And then it turns out to be really ugly. Like, it's very odd that it's so thin. And they were like, you're an idiot. And so now it gets thicker. The only other thing, and then soon we get to like buildings and we grow in scale, and I shrink down for a little bit more. The only other thing that people buy from me a lot are my vases, and they really work. That simple as that. They really, like, you can hold a giant branch was a small one. Technically, I don't know, I got lucky. It's a really good piece of design that I just happened to, I made it for somebody's wedding, as like a very important to me person's wedding, an ex-girlfriend. And I gave it as a wedding gift, and then it became, and it works really well. I don't know if I need to talk about my car. My students already know my car because I also drive it around. But together with Bless, he made a sauna car where you could take sauna. I mean, it's funny, but it worked, and it was really hot in there, and it's really hot. Everybody asks. The heat is very dry, so it didn't fuck up the electrical. It still works. It's parked at the airport. I get it in the morning. I pick up my kids. It's just like that. It's perfect, and it gets, and you know, kudos on Mercedes. And then they make a blanket out of it, and bless are a lot of people who are worth looking into. I would like to bring them here. In fact, they're coming next month, and they're having an exhibition that we should all go to. I promised that we would go. Because I'm interested in how things again become domestic, or become public, or change their kind of role in society. So it's a very odd thing to me that these private spaces are driving around and parking and taking up all this urban space. So one of our better projects was just sticking umbrellas on the side of a car so that you could relax there. Or this drinks table mounted on the front of a Jaguar, which is just a drinks table on a Jaguar, but it immediately suggests that's part of everybody's space and no longer a private space. Simple enough kind of shift between like the modus of design. That's not a motorcycle too. Bless had this idea. They made a really nice vacuum cleaner design on an office chair, a little bit like these poles, but a little bit like some of the poles, like it didn't work that well, right? And I, like architect, like technical guy, like I'm gonna come and make it work. And then of course I made this thing and they were like, it's not funny anymore. So you gotta be careful. Can't, like, I don't know if it works. If I totally become like serious guy who just redoes Knoll quietly, that's also sad. So I don't know exactly where I'm gonna end up in a couple years, because that's a cautionary tale. I was like, look at this thing I made, you wanna make the pillow on top? And they were like, no. Even though it costs 3,000 euros and it's a chrome freaking polished, super dope vacuum cleaner, just for the record. And it works perfectly. So somehow all that work that I just did, and a whole lot more in the same vein, and one other building, which is coming, maybe 3 other buildings, which are only one of which I show, like led me to have all those buildings in this drawing that are now with building permits, all of them. And they all start construction this year, and so somehow we're doing these 4 projects in Albania, in Tirana, that also are both kind of arrangements. One is an arrangement. Well, you'll see. So the first one seemed to be that the assignment was like a little bit of hotel, a little bit of office. Maybe there's a restaurant. Maybe there's a rich people's house. Maybe there's really cheap housing. Every time I asked a question, they were like, "What do you want?" And I was like, "No. And I don't know what I want to be inside that 44-story building. You tell me what you want." And so I like kind of beat it out of them some list of programming. And so that's what it is. That's like regular housing. That's cheap housing. Bigger flats, more bedrooms, but like cheaper square meters. That's all hotel. That's all office. That's all retail. That's a restaurant. The restaurant is supposed to be there. I mean, that's an assignment, right? And it was like, okay. And the Eddie Rama was like, I want you to make a sign. And I was like, what's it gonna say? And he was like, I don't know. And so there's a giant sign and a giant moon clock from Pio Benifavi and another artist. And so it's, should have paused on the model is way more fun. But you're all familiar with Vienna and Berlin. It's an urban infill site. So that's the Blockland, right? That's the normal, regular block So it works just like a normal European building, except it's very, very high. And there are earthquakes there, so it's kind of complicated floor plan. And so what happens is that the bigger apartments get lower, and then you end up with this kind of variety of spaces that happens, and then you end up with this thing. And it, to me, as you can imagine, I mean, if it's not clear, this is a kitchen 44 stories tall, right? I mean, just logically, like the logic of the kitchen is like, is it together, is it not together, disjointed or not disjointed, unified, not unified? You know, it's like any day you can go whichever way you want on that story, right? Right? Because it's like it's a real question. And I'm not. It felt to me like the program was giving it to me to be divided, and now I've just sold you on that. Surely, as you all know, I could have sold you on a super slick, unified thing that did the same thing. But so that's what I'm debating about. But that one is the first one, and the one they're digging the hole, which is kind of wild to me, obviously. And I'm still trying to figure out how to get the mini splits invisible, because there's no central air, because they don't want that, because they haven't figured out 30 years after communism how to have like communal electrical bills. But they will. So I convinced them to have shared air for the office, so the office looks like an office building, because office buildings, in my typological head, never have mini splits in front of the windows. I made that up. But hotels have individual balconies, right? There's a kind of logic to that, right? There's, right, like bigger, dense units have lots and lots of small windows. Penthouses, it looks a little bit like Park Avenue. And I sort of like the mix of it. And then, so like 3 days later, this other guy, also in Albania, called for this building 300 meters away. And it goes on 300 meters like that. And so this guy was really clear. This guy, I mean, my favorite thing that he said to me is, stop working, the fish is good here. By which he meant like, I don't want to see your floor plans anymore. I'm sorry that you keep showing them, and I know you worked really hard, but I trust you, so let's not talk about it anymore. And he sticks with that. Like, he sticks with it. His assistant asked for the parking spots to be wider one time 3 months ago. I made them wider. I changed the whole grid. He was happy. End of story. And this guy asked, he was like, just normal flats. Normal. Nothing special. He was like, I don't want to see anything special. And I was like, why do you hire me? He's like, Eddie Rama likes you, which is debatable whether Eddie Rama likes you, but I was like, yes, Eddie Rama likes you, the Prime Minister. And so I'm really, really happy about this thing. And it's called the Fruit Depot because his father owned a piece of ground and had a fruit stand on the piece of ground. And now he's who knows what he does. But I so enjoy this building, I have to say. As you can see, every room has a balcony and a sunshade. And this is the current floor plan. It still takes some work, but there are 4 shafts. There are 8 units. There are 65 square meters, 2-bedroom units. They have each 3 balconies. Every bedroom has like a 3.90 facade, right? So every room is exactly the same, right? So that's 390, right? That's 110. I mean, I'm really like back to like, you can imagine I don't show the 45 plans of the other one. And my idea for the other tower, of course, made like a nightmare of work because they're all different, which is there's a real reason why people would do that. Meanwhile, of course, if somebody did ask me for like a sushi restaurant, I'd spend 6 months on it. And here it's like hard to spend 6 months. But this you can spend 6 months and months and months on the one plan, and then it gets repeated. And then I thought, like, well, you can even do a hotel. And I convinced him to do that plan for 3 floors, at the bottom 3 floors, which is 24 rooms. And it works. I mean, never mind that. And even like the column goes through the headboard, and I don't exactly know how the power is going to work out. And, okay, there's a lot of shafts, admittedly, right? And they're shifted, which doesn't work. But but think how cool that hallway is with all that many doors also. Isn't that fun? I think it's really fun. I'm really into the order of it, and I'm really into the so what I want to say is like it's turning, I'm good at arranging and it's turning me on to not arrange, to solve. Solve is that the right word? Solve sounds so reductive. And the grid is funky and relates entirely to the parking, the column grid, in case you're wondering. Like but it's also became symmetrical. Took forever, but then it like, just want to say like, floor plan of the house makes me really happy. And then you get all those rooms, like from Sun, and they're all the same, and that is like from here to there is like 168 square meter apartment, which is pretty easy, right? Another house that we applied for permission for is a little, like a Baugruppe in New York, which is actually only 160 square meters, but it's in a place that floods next to JFK, like really, but it floods now. So like, I don't know if you heard about climate change, but it's really it's gonna be like underwater. But anyway, I bought this piece of ground with a bunch of people together, as one does with a Baugruppe, and it cost relatively very little to make a kind of weekend house, but a weekend house that you can reach by subway, right? So you can take the A train and the E to get there, and it's 3 blocks from the subway, and then it's on the water. And it's what I call, again, like, back to arranging, it's typological, right? Like, that's the motel, 2 floors, the motel typology. Laubengang, although I prefer motel. You can say Laubengang. There is no great word for Laubengang in English, sadly. No? You agree with that? So motel, staircase, kitchen, dining, living, right? And then that thing is some kind of fantasy I had about that one Frei Otto unbuilt building in Stuttgart where you tried to build land, like, and then you could build whatever house you want, like the Ozo house in Berlin. But then the one in Stuttgart was like free shaped, and so I had this idea that I still have, that it's free shaped new land that you could then construct whatever you want because it's, again, going to flood. Meanwhile, after I got the building permit and so forth, I sent somebody to Karlsruhe to the archive. I need to include this in the next lecture. The Frei Otto one just looks crazy in the model photo, but actually, of course, it's Frei Otto, so it's incredibly rational and not at all free like I suggested. So, careful. Trying to figure out how to make a free shape is like the hardest thing ever. And I fail regularly to do that. And then back to Albania, together with Bauku, back to clarity. Bauku and Muto, we just won a we won a competition and got the building permit for the cadastre offices of the government. And so what we're doing here, this is Pier Paolo's like model color scheme. I happen to like showing models. Gilles and I are like, tone it down, buddy, but which we will. But basically it's a gigantic public building, right? It's 54 meters tall. And the red thing is existing, not red, but it's there, existing. And this, back to Pier Paolo's thing, like, Pier Paolo's like, it's just like Vicenza, but it's 3 times bigger than Palladio. And so we have this quite nice public space on the top, and it's a government office building. And it's really, hopefully, inexpensive to make. It's very efficient. It's very clear. You can have a dark archive, because they need an archive in the middle. So you have this dark space, you know, functional meeting rooms and so forth, and like with light wells, and a kind of party public space on the roof. And I'm really excited about this building. And again, I would put this one in in between, clear and arranging. And then we won it in concert with that. The same day, we won this other competition, also all together, for something that I named Lift Tower mistakenly, which is a bad name. But the idea is that the ground floor was up because Eddie Roma, I knew that I would win. I knew that we would win if we gave the ground floor back to the public space, which we did, just like that. Because it's not a bad thing to do, to give the ground floor back to the public. And so it's lifted by a circle, a square, and a triangle, right? By these platonic shapes, which are the cores, of course. I should draw the cores into this diagram, apologies. right? And then so you have 3 cores that go up, and then they're like the shared space of different places. And then you sleep here, and you have living rooms here. Sometimes you sleep in the other ones. It's changing, but it works very well as a hotel also. And then of course we came back to it, and it's like, okay, we made it much smaller. We have to keep working on it and keep working on it, and whether or not it gets clear or not, it's whether this becomes arranging or straightforward is not quite resolved. So then another project that I start construction this year, which I'm really excited about, is an arts and education center plus sports. I'm more into arts and education than I am into sports, like my dint of life. But it's quite a nice program. And so what we do in Benin, in Cotonou, which is in West Africa, and the biggest thing, so we took the program out as one does, and the biggest thing by far is a 300-meter running track. And the thing you need is shade. And so essentially what we're doing right now is we're building the running track as the roof. And the other program, which is rather smaller, we're extending it underneath, and it's becoming a library, a gallery space, several restaurants, and then the sports gets kind of spread around the site. And then you can use this whole ring as a kind of concert venue, which was very important to our clients who are, let's say, a quasi-governmental organization of Benin mixed with, let's say, local money and public money, but mostly local money, which is quite nice. So like the people who pay for it and hire us also want to use it, want to do this music festival, want to teach arts programs, want to do what they want to do. And this, talking about like the broader kind of architecture question, is again about like arranging or clarity. Like, does it win? And I think the running track wins, and so it works quite okay. Sorry, I've been talking a long time. And there's some like tons more projects, but you get the idea. And it's a huge thing, but also like rather human scale. And then, obviously I talk about the biggest project that we finished, which is our Baugruppe in Berlin on Kurfürstenstrasse, and all of my students have been there, so I'll be quick about this, but also kind of explain it. I mean, this photo is just the models of just that building, in that building. And we had a lot of time. I was 29 when I started that, and I just had time. I just didn't have kids. I didn't have a ton of other work. I didn't even figure out the kitchens were interesting. I didn't even know how to cook. So there was that. And it was coming out of SANAA, so we were like, okay. So what we did was we made like really a lot of options at the time to try to figure out what was important, like what were the principles of the design. And there are many, many versions, but we kind of came to three kind of issues that mattered to us. One is like, the site is north-south oriented, and the north is a treeless street that is a place to bisect since 1870. So it's like a special, very urban, pretty rough street. And the south is like a Swedish wet dream with like a kindergarten and grass and sunlight and so on. And then we kind of in Berlin, it's an incredibly rigid Altbau system where a dining room is the same as a bedroom, is the same as a living room, is the same as another bedroom, meaning like Berlin is almost a metabolist construction, right? And kitchens are half of that same bay, and the bathroom is the other half of that same bay. And so many of you have heard me here say this before, but so we took those parameters and we said, okay, we want to have extreme spaces inside of the home. And so, for example, this was an option at some point, like to the south, we opened too many staircases, and then we had like tiny rooms at the north facade and giant rooms on the south facade. Same story, except split level, where we had a kind of opaque level and a kind of kitchen, dining, living level. this was divided up by program, not unlike the tower, if you can imagine it flipped on its head. And then we started messing, and then we got frustrated, so we were messing with this thing, and starting to figure out how to layer it. And so this is like what we came to, which is quite clear, which is 6 towers, double high space, and they overlap, right? And they do a number of things. They also mess with, they also follow, but mess with the block wound. So in Berlin, for whatever crazy reason, they decided that the 20th century didn't happen and that we should build architecture like it's 1890 before the world was fucked several times, particularly centered in Berlin. So instead, so they had this idea that you have to build out the block, right? Modernism almost doesn't exist as a concept in the rules, in the kind of construction rules of Berlin. And now, even if I'm friends with her, Petra Kaufeld is, self-proclaimed Luddite. It's pretty hardcore. And so we're trying to kind of figure that out. Meanwhile, we do follow 19th century logic, meaning that the corner is quite high, right? And it follows that traflinia, and this follows this traflinia. You see it in real life in a second. But the 6 towers overlap and they align to the other 2 streets. And then as a result of that, the apartments overlap, so they have big and small spaces, and the double high space passes through. So the double high space where they don't overlap is always passing through. So this is double high as an L, this is double high as an S, this is another kind of S, this one becomes a T, and a T, and a T, and an L. And then so this is, in construction, one tower over another. And then as a result of that, they all fold into on each other. So you see all your neighbors, which is quite an accident that's quite nice. So from one apartment, you see 8 other apartments, and it's 25 units. So you see different apartments on different sides of you. And people don't stand in the corner of their apartment naked. Even idiots like me don't stand naked right in the corner of the glass apartment. I do things in the kitchen, maybe naked. But so then it's okay. It's only at the corner that you see each other. So you get the light, and you get this. It's actually quite a good community, and the people are really, really friends with each other, unless they started from the beginning, and then they're really annoyed with me. But they're not annoyed with me about the architecture. They're just annoyed that it took so long, and it was tough, and I was a kind of a brutal architect about it, which is okay. And my clients deserve endless credit because they built it, right? But this is looking from one apartment to another, down to a sex worker working outside. So you're on this kind of cliff edge, and you all see each other all the time. And as a result, you kind of act with your neighbors in mind a little bit more because you see them. It's not like a normal kind of, let's say, double-loaded corridor where you make a lot of noise but you're annoying somebody that you can't see. Like here, you see them. They turn the lights on. You see if you annoy your neighbors. I won't go into the building group aspect of it too much, but I also live there, and we also work there. So I kind of run my office there and make a mess there quite a lot, and it works really well as a building in this kind of shared space. And here you see what I mean, that we kind of vaguely follow the traflinia of the others, and so it's a very contemporary building in a 19th century, let's say, envelope logic. And here you can kind of begin to imagine at the bottom like how the double height spaces work, right? Like where this double height space works. And then just talking about failures, because I think it's nice. I mean, we had this kind of fantasy because it's a slab scheme. So the white walls, the divisions between apartments don't matter, right? It's a model of slabs. You don't really care about the walls. And so we had this idea that's very naive that people might like open up to their neighbor or like have a shared room between them. And I failed at that because capitalism is like a bigger force than anything. Or on architecture. But it was a kind of idea for a long time that this happens to be my apartment here, that I would share it with Lars Muller. And I would like sometimes go into his library and we would have a kitchen in between. And he doesn't really cook, so I thought it was a good deal, and I could go to his library, which seemed like a good deal. But then we're all like too busy and frantic to like negotiate that. Also, the financial part of it seems very difficult. But the feeling of it is quite nice. So what in fact happens naturally, even if there's no door, is that there's like the center of somebody else's bedroom, or the corner of somebody else's bedroom is the center of this flat. So like this room belongs to someone else, and it's coming into this flat. Right? You see it from another perspective here. And so that does many things. One is that you feel your connection to each other. But the other thing is that it makes the apartments feel enormous because they're interweaving with each other. Right? Simply enough. And I'm kind of into this idea, it's a slab scheme, so like it doesn't want to have, and I, as you already heard, I've been dismantling kitchens for a long time and trying to turn like everything into furniture off the walls. And so I got into this idea of that I want to live like on camping all the time, right? So this is like a box for hammock, so it's not exactly. And the idea of like camping as also luxury became important to me. Right? And it also works for my kids to like just be like, get in a tent if you like, because it's a very big space. And then it sort of works to tie things together that way. And I think I tried to convince everybody, and I dragged our own studio. We went camping last semester, apropos this like feeling of camping as a kind of conceptual idea. I'm getting to the end of this lecture, fear not. I just, on a kind of kill the rabbit idea from a while back, I got into buckets. I think buckets are underloved. I thought buckets were underloved. And then I was totally happy that I just bought nice buckets. And then later, we figured out that you could drill a hole and then you could hide cables in it. But even before that, I was totally happy with just putting buckets around as a kind of interior notion. And so I stand by apropos poles or whatever else you want to do. Like, there's a lot of obvious stuff out there that's not properly played out that's to be found. And it gets better. And I didn't invite the photographer back after I drilled a hole in the side. And I don't take my own pictures, so it's like a deal to get it photographed. The buckets, they work really well. And then apropos buckets, this week, in case anybody goes to Milan tomorrow, one more day of this exhibition of boxes where I invited lots of people, including Sam, to make a box. His box you can't see in this particular photo because it came late. Sam, it came late. Came late. Look at all these architects. Sorry, just going up. You can take it. But it's a similar idea. I'm trying to kind of explore typology, right? Tents, boxes, buckets, poles, etc. Trying to kind of, and of course, not many of them are good, right? Including some of the ones that I did, and certainly the ones I bought. But some of them are, and some have good detail, and very few people thought about a handle. I want to do it again. I will. It'll work. Just a huge number of architects sent me things that didn't open. I said, storage, you can open it and you can sit on it. You can't sit on Sam's, but you can't open 50% of them. You can, no, just no, everybody. Kubrick's very good box. Just giving you a hard time. And then another thing, like back to like borrowing. So there's that strain of typology. There's the strain with Florence Knoll. There's a strain of the yellow. So I was in the blue period. Now I'm in the yellow period. And line 3, the Milan subway, we remade exactly as it is. We remade the panels, and then we made furniture out of it. And the lights, we just used the lights, just like that. And that was besides poles. And that was this week's fun. And again, if you go to Milan tomorrow, that's still there. And that's what it looked like in the subway. The subway has those same lights and the same ceiling, and we just remade it as it is. That's it.